Millionaire CEO came to buy engagement ring and saw his ex behind the counter holding little boy. Hi my beautiful family, welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family story channel. Heavenly God, we come before you with humble hearts. Please cover every woman in this family with your divine protection. Give her strength when she is tired, peace when she is overwhelmed, and hope when the world feels heavy. Honor her sacrifices, heal her silent pains, and reward her patience with joy. Let no woman here ever feel invisible, broken, or alone. Raise her with dignity, crown her with wisdom, and surround her with love she truly deserves. My beautiful family, women are not weak. They are the backbone of every home, the quiet force behind every success, and the heartbeat of this family. Respect them, pray for them, and value them, because where women are honored, blessings never stop flowing. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, I am with Mr. Peter. Ashlyn Bruce didn't believe in fate until the man who destroyed her walked through her boutique door holding another woman's hand. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows of Bruce Designs, catching the diamonds in her display cases and turning them into fragments of captured light. She'd built this place from nothing, every piece of custom jewelry a testament to hands that had learned to create again after being broken. The boutique occupied prime real estate in the Arts District, her name etched in gold across floor-to-ceiling windows. Celebrities flew in from both coasts to commission her work. She'd clawed her way up from a hospital bed where doctors said she'd never design again, and she'd proven every single one of them wrong. Behind the counter, 3-year-old Justin sat cross-legged on his playmat, building an elaborate castle from blocks. The noise-cancelling headphones she'd bought him created a small bubble of peace while she worked with clients. Her sister's son, the only family she had left in this world, the child she'd fought to keep when grief nearly swallowed her whole. The door chimed. Ashlyn glanced up from the custom setting she'd been examining, her professional smile already in place. Then she saw him. Jeff Vance. 4 years vanished in a heartbeat. 4 years of physical therapy and nightmares and rebuilding herself from ruins. 4 years of becoming someone stronger, harder, untouchable. All of it threatened to crack apart because he had the audacity to walk into her sanctuary. He looked different, older. The boyish softness she'd loved had sharpened into something colder, more polished. Expensive suit, designer watch, the kind of wealth that came from family money and knowing the right people. His dark hair had threads of silver at the temples now. He'd become exactly what his mother wanted him to be. The woman on his arm was predictable. Blonde hair that cost more to maintain than most people's rent. Skin that had never seen hard work or real sun. She wore her wealth like armor, diamonds at her throat and wrists, a designer dress that probably cost what Ashlyn used to make in 6 months before everything changed. We're looking for something unique, the blonde said, her voice carrying that particular breathiness that came from private schools and summer homes in the Hamptons. Jeff said you do custom work. We want an engagement ring that absolutely no one else will have. Ashlyn's hands tightened on the velvet ring tray she'd been holding. Her fingers ached, the old pain flaring the way it always did when stress crept into her shoulders. She forced herself to breathe, to stay professional, to remember that she'd survived worse than this. I do custom commissions, Ashlyn said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. What kind of design were you imagining? Jeff's eyes finally landed on her face. She watched the recognition hit him like a physical blow. His expression shifted through shock, disbelief, something that might have been regret if she believed he was capable of such an emotion. The color drained from his face. Ashlyn. Her name came out strangled, barely a whisper. The blonde glanced between them, her perfectly shaped eyebrows drawing together. You two know each other. We used to, Ashlyn said before Jeff could respond. She kept her tone cool, detached, the way she'd practiced 1,000 times in therapy when her counselor asked her to imagine this exact scenario. A long time ago, different lives. She moved behind the counter, needing the physical barrier between them. Justin looked up at the movement, his dark eyes curious behind his headphones. She smiled at him, the expression genuine, before returning her attention to the couple who just walked into her carefully constructed piece. "Let me show you some of my work," Ashlyn continued, pulling out her portfolio. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the leather binder. "I specialize in pieces that tell a story. Each design is unique to the client." The blonde leaned over the counter, examining the photographs with the critical eye of someone used to the finest things. "These are stunning. Absolutely stunning. I knew we came to the right place." Jeff hadn't moved. He stood frozen near the door, staring at Ashlyn like she was a ghost he couldn't quite believe was real. "This one," the blonde said, pointing to a design near the back of the portfolio. "Can you do something like this, but with a larger center stone? I'm thinking at least 5 carats. Ashlyn's blood turned to ice. The design the woman had chosen was the last piece she'd created before her hands were destroyed. She'd sketched it in the hospital during those first terrible weeks when the doctors were still uncertain if she'd ever regain full function. The ring featured an intricate infinity pattern, 2 paths winding together and apart, meeting in the center where the diamond would sit. She'd designed it during the darkest period of her life, trying to hold on to something beautiful while everything else fell apart. "That design isn't for sale," Ashlyn said quietly. The blonde's smile faltered. "Excuse me? That particular design is not available for commission. I can create something else for you, something equally beautiful, but not that one." "Everything has a price." The blonde's voice had taken on an edge, the kind of entitlement that came from never being told no. "I'm prepared to pay whatever you want." Ashlyn closed the portfolio with more force than necessary. "That ring was the last piece I designed before my hands were broken. It's not about money, it's not available." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Jeff made a sound, something between a gasp and a groan. His face had gone completely white now. She saw his hands clench at his sides, saw the way his whole body went rigid. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd always known, hadn't he? On some level, he must have understood what his mother was capable of, what she'd done to protect her precious son from making what she considered a catastrophic mistake. The blonde looked between them, confusion and irritation warring on her face. "I don't understand. What happened to your hands?" "Nothing that concerns you," Ashlyn said. She was proud of how steady her voice remained. "I can show you other designs, beautiful pieces that would suit you perfectly, but that one isn't available at any price." Jeff finally moved. He took a step toward the counter, his hand reaching out as if to touch her, to bridge the impossible distance between them. "Ashlyn, don't." The word came out sharper than she intended. Justin looked up again, sensitive to her tone even through his headphones. She softened her expression for him before returning her gaze to Jeff. "Don't say anything. Just leave." "We're not leaving," the blonde said, her voice rising. "We came here specifically because everyone said you were the best. We're getting married in 6 months and I want that ring." "Then you'll have to find another designer." Ashlyn moved to the door, opening it wide. "Bruce Designs reserves the right to decline any commission. I'm declining yours." The blonde turned to Jeff, expecting him to defend her, to argue, to throw around whatever weight his name and money carried. But Jeff just stood there, staring at Ashlyn with devastation written across every line of his face. "You knew," he said, his voice breaking. "All this time you've been here, building this, and I never—" "Get out of my store, Jeff!" Ashlyn's control was slipping. She could feel the old rage rising, the fury she'd worked years to contain. "Get out before I call the police." The blonde grabbed Jeff's arm, tugging him toward the door. "This is insane. We're leaving. There are plenty of other jewelers who would kill for our business." Jeff let himself be pulled toward the exit, but his eyes never left Ashlyn's face. "I didn't know," he said, the words desperate. "I swear to God, I didn't know what she did to you." "You didn't ask," Ashlyn replied. "You just believed. You disappeared, and that told me everything I needed to know about what I meant to you." She closed the door behind them, locked it, and flipped the sign to closed, even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. Her hands were shaking now, the tremors she'd worked so hard to eliminate coming back with a vengeance. She leaned against the door, struggling to breathe, fighting against the panic attack that threatened to drag her under. Justin pulled off his headphones and came to her, his small hand finding hers. "Mama sad?" She sank down to his level, pulling him into her arms. "Mama's okay, baby, just some bad memories." "Bad man?" Justin asked, his voice worried. Ashlyn pressed her face into his hair, breathing in the scent of the baby shampoo she used on him every night. "A man who made bad choices a long time ago, but he can't hurt us now." Through the window, she watched Jeff and his fiancée argue on the sidewalk. The blonde was gesturing angrily, clearly furious about being thrown out. Jeff just stood there, his shoulders slumped, staring back at the boutique like he could see through the walls to where Ashlyn held the child who should have been theirs. The child they'd made together, the one she'd lost when his mother's hired thugs shattered her hands and her dreams and her body all in one terrible night. Jeff Vance had walked back into her life, holding another woman's hand, ready to buy her an engagement ring, completely unprepared to face the destruction he'd left behind. Ashlyn stood, lifting Justin onto her hip. She moved through her boutique, past the displays of beautiful things she'd created despite everything, past the evidence of her survival and success. She'd built an empire from broken pieces. She'd become someone his mother could never break again. Let him marry his blonde socialite. Let him live his perfect life with his perfect family name and his perfect reputation. She'd won by surviving, and she would never, ever let him close enough to hurt her again. Chapter 2. The Night That Destroyed Everything. The nightmares always started the same way. Ashlyn would be in her old apartment, the tiny studio she'd rented when she was still a design student at the academy. She'd be sitting at her workbench, sketching a new piece, completely absorbed in the flow of creation. The pencil would move across the paper with certainty, her hands steady and sure, young and unbroken. In the dream, she'd hear the knock at the door. She'd get up to answer it. And then the dream would fracture into violence and pain, her hands crushed under boots, her body curled on the floor, voices telling her that Jeff Vance didn't want her or the baby growing inside her. She woke gasping, her sheets soaked with sweat, her hands clenched so tightly that her nails had left crescents in her palms. The bedside clock read 3 in the morning. Justin slept peacefully in his room down the hall, safe in the home she'd built for them. She could hear the soft hum of his white noise machine, the sound that helped him sleep through her nightmares when they came. Ashlyn got up, wrapped herself in the silk robe hanging on her bedroom door, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. Her penthouse apartment overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of lights scattered across the darkness. She'd purchased this place 2 years ago, after Bruce Designs had its first 7-figure year. The security system was state-of-the-art. The building had a doorman who knew her by name. No one could reach her here without her permission. She made herself chamomile tea, the ritual soothing even when sleep wouldn't return. Her hands ached as she held the warm mug, the old injuries making themselves known. Cold weather made it worse. Stress made it worse. Seeing Jeff Vance after 4 years of carefully constructed peace had made it infinitely worse. The memories she'd worked so hard to bury came flooding back anyway. She'd been 24 years old, top of her class at the Design Academy, with a portfolio that had professors calling her a prodigy. Jeff had been 26, fresh off his MBA, working to prove himself in his family's investment firm. They'd met at a gallery opening, one of those pretentious affairs where the wine was expensive and the conversation was cheap. She'd been there on a scholarship ticket, studying the jewelry pieces on display and taking mental notes. He'd been there because his mother insisted he network with the right people. They'd both been hiding in the corner, equally bored, when their eyes met. The connection had been immediate and electric. He'd asked about her thoughts on the collection. She'd been honest, critiquing the technical flaws in the settings while admiring the design vision. He'd laughed, genuinely delighted by her confidence. By the end of the night, they'd exchanged numbers. By the end of the month, they'd fallen completely and recklessly in love. His family hadn't approved from the beginning. Ashlyn came from the wrong neighborhood, had the wrong skin color, lacked the right pedigree. Jeff's mother had made that abundantly clear the first time they met, but Jeff had been defiant then, young and convinced that love conquered all. He'd told his mother that Ashlyn was the woman he was going to marry, that nothing she said would change his mind. For a while, Ashlyn had believed him. They'd been together for over a year when she found out she was pregnant. She remembered the moment exactly, sitting on the bathroom floor of her apartment, staring at the positive test, her heart racing with equal parts terror and joy. She'd called Jeff immediately. He'd come over within the hour, held her while she cried, promised her that everything would be okay. "We'll figure this out together," he'd said, his hand on her still flat stomach. "We'll make this work. I love you. I love this baby already." She'd believed that too. 2 days later, everything changed. She'd been working late at her studio space in the academy, finishing a commissioned piece that was due the following week. The pregnancy made her tired, but she was determined to complete the work. Her future depended on building her reputation, on proving she could deliver exceptional pieces on deadline. She'd come home around 10 that night, exhausted but satisfied with her progress. Her apartment building was in a neighborhood that wasn't great, but wasn't terrible. She'd always felt safe enough, had never had any problems. The men were waiting in the stairwell. They'd grabbed her before she could scream, before she could run. 2 of them, big, professional. They'd dragged her into her apartment using her own keys, closed the door behind them, and delivered their message with methodical brutality. "Jeff Vance sent us," one of them had said, his voice emotionless. "He wants you to understand something. He doesn't want you. He doesn't want your baby. You're going to disappear. You're going to get rid of it. And you're never going to contact him again." She'd fought them. God, she'd fought. But they were so much stronger, and there were 2 of them. When she wouldn't stop screaming, wouldn't promise to do what they demanded, they'd decided to make sure she couldn't create the thing that had brought them there in the first place. They'd targeted her hands specifically. She remembered the sound of bones breaking, the way her screams had torn her throat raw, the metallic taste of blood when she bit through her own lip, trying to endure the pain. They'd destroyed her hands with systematic precision, crushing each finger, fracturing her wrists, ensuring that even if she survived, she'd never hold a pencil or set a stone again. Then they'd kicked her in the stomach until she curled into a ball, until she felt something tear inside her, until the world went grey around the edges. She didn't know how long she'd lain there after they left. Hours, maybe. Long enough to bleed, long enough to lose the baby, long enough to understand that her entire life had just been destroyed. A neighbor had found her the next morning when they heard her moaning through the thin walls. The paramedic said she was lucky to be alive. The police took her statement, seemed genuinely concerned, but then the case went nowhere. The security cameras in her building had mysteriously malfunctioned that night. No witnesses came forward. The men had worn gloves, left no evidence. Within a week, the investigation went cold. Jeff never called, never came to the hospital, never checked to see if she was alive or dead. His silence told her everything she needed to know about who'd really sent those men. She'd spent 2 months in the hospital, 8 more in intensive physical therapy. The doctors said she'd never regain full function in her hands, that nerve damage was too extensive, that she should consider a career change. Her scholarship was revoked when she couldn't return to classes. Her apartment lease expired while she was still learning to hold a fork again. She'd lost everything in one night: her career, her baby, her hands, the man she loved. But she'd survived. Her sister Keisha had taken her in during those first terrible months. Keisha had been her only family, the only person who didn't look at her with pity or doubt. When Ashlyn said she was going to learn to design again, Keisha had believed her. When Ashlyn spent 18 hours a day forcing her broken hands to remember how to create, Keisha had brought her food and made sure she didn't destroy herself in the process. Keisha had saved her life by refusing to let her give up. 2 years after the attack, Ashlyn had sold her first custom piece. A simple engagement ring, nothing like the elaborate designs she'd created before, but it was hers. made with hands that had learned to be steady again through sheer force of will. The client had cried when Ashlyn presented it, said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. That sale had been the beginning of Bruce Designs. Then Keisha had gotten pregnant. A surprise, an accident, but Keisha had been thrilled. She'd always wanted to be a mother. Ashlyn had been terrified for her, protective in a way that bordered on paranoid. She'd accompanied Keisha to every doctor's appointment, had been there for every ultrasound, had helped set up the nursery in Keisha's small apartment. Keisha had gone into labor on a Tuesday morning. Ashlyn had driven her to the hospital, held her hand through the contractions, promised her that everything would be fine. The delivery had been complicated, the baby had been in distress, the doctors had to make a choice between saving Keisha or saving the child. Keisha had made the choice for them. "Save my baby," she'd whispered to Ashlyn with the last of her strength. "Promise me you'll take care of my baby." Ashlyn had promised. And then she'd watched her sister die, bringing Justin into the world. Standing in her kitchen now, the tea growing cold in her hands, Ashlyn let the tears come. She cried for the baby she'd lost 4 years ago. She cried for Keisha, for the nephew who would never know how fiercely his mother had loved him. She cried for the girl she'd been before that terrible night, the one who believed in happy endings and true love. But she didn't cry for Jeff Vance. He'd walked into her boutique with another woman, ready to buy her an engagement ring, completely unaware of the wreckage he'd left behind. His shocked face when he saw her, his stammered denials, his claim that he didn't know what his mother had done. Lies, all of it lies. If he'd loved her, he would have come looking when she disappeared. If he'd cared about their baby, he would have made sure she was safe. If he'd had even a shred of decency, he would have questioned why she'd suddenly vanished from his life without a word. Instead, he'd moved on, built his career, found a socially acceptable woman to marry, lived his perfect life while she'd clawed her way back from hell. The sun was starting to rise, painting the city in shades of pink and gold. Ashlyn rinsed her mug, checked on Justin one more time, and prepared to face another day. She'd built Bruce Designs into something powerful, something his mother's money and violence couldn't touch. She'd created beauty from broken pieces, had turned her survival into art that people paid extraordinary amounts to own. Jeff Vance was her past, a chapter she'd closed and locked away. Seeing him again had ripped open old wounds, yes, but wounds could heal. They'd healed before, they would heal again. She just had to remember that she was stronger now than she'd ever been, harder, untouchable, and she would never, ever let him hurt her again. Chapter 3. The Truth He Abandoned. Jeff Vance hadn't slept in 3 days. He sat in his downtown office, the city spread out below him in a carpet of lights, and tried to reconcile the woman he'd seen in that boutique with the Ashlyn he remembered. The Ashlyn from his memories had been soft, full of dreams, her hands always moving as she sketched designs in the margins of whatever paper was nearby. She'd laughed easily, loved fiercely, believed in him when no one else did. The woman who'd thrown him out of her store had been made of steel and ice. Her eyes had looked at him with such contempt, such pure hatred, that it had felt like a physical blow. And when she'd said those words, when she'd told him about her hands being broken, his entire world had tilted sideways. His mother had done that. He knew it with absolute certainty, the same way he knew his own name. The moment Ashlyn mentioned her hands, everything clicked into place. All the pieces he'd been too blind to see, too naive to question, suddenly formed a picture so ugly he could barely stand to look at it. His mother had destroyed the woman he loved. The intercom on his desk buzzed. His assistant's voice came through, hesitant and worried. "Mr. Vance, Victoria is here to see you. She's quite upset." Jeff rubbed his face, exhaustion and guilt making his head pound. "Send her in." Victoria swept into his office, wearing her anger like a designer coat. She was beautiful in that carefully constructed way of women who'd never known hardship. Her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the late hour, her makeup flawless. Everything about her was exactly what his mother had wanted for him. Social connections, old money, the right family name. Are you going to explain what happened today? Victoria demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. That woman threw us out of her store like we were trash. Do you know how humiliating that was? She had every right, Jeff said quietly. Victoria stopped mid-stride, her eyes narrowing. Excuse me? Ashlyn had every right to throw us out, to refuse the commission, to want nothing to do with me. Who is she to you? Victoria's voice had gone cold. And don't tell me she's just an ex-girlfriend. I saw how you looked at her. I saw how she looked at you. Jeff stood, moving to the windows. The office felt suffocating suddenly, the walls pressing in. We were together 4 years ago. We were planning to get married. She was pregnant with my child. The silence behind him was deafening. What happened? Victoria asked finally, her tone carefully controlled. I believed a lie. Jeff's reflection stared back at him from the glass, and he hated what he saw. My mother told me Ashlyn had taken money to leave, $2 million. She showed me bank statements, evidence that looked real. She said Ashlyn had chosen the money over me, over our baby. And you believed her. I believed her, Jeff confirmed, the shame of it burning in his chest. I was angry, hurt. I thought the woman I loved had sold me out. So I disappeared, blocked her number, refused to see her, moved to the West Coast office for 2 years to get away from the memories. Jesus, Jeff. Today, when Ashlyn told me about her hands being broken, I understood what really happened. My mother didn't just pay her off. She had her attacked, destroyed her hands so she couldn't design anymore, couldn't pursue the career she loved. And the baby, he couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of it was too much. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but there was steel underneath. You need to confront your mother. Find out the truth. I know the truth, Jeff said. I've always known it, somewhere deep down. I just didn't want to believe my own mother was capable of something that evil. What are you going to do? Jeff turned to face her. Victoria stood in the center of his office, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She was everything his family had wanted for him, safe, appropriate, uncomplicated, and he didn't love her. He'd never loved her the way he'd loved Ashlyn. Victoria was a choice made out of convenience and family pressure, a relationship that had drifted into an engagement because it was expected, not because his heart demanded it. I'm going to talk to Ashlyn, he said. I'm going to find out what really happened that night, and then I'm going to make my mother answer for what she did. And us? Victoria asked, though from her tone she already knew the answer. I'm sorry, Jeff said, and he meant it. You deserve someone who loves you completely. That's not me. It's never been me. Victoria's laugh was bitter. I knew. I think I've always known. Your mother promised me you'd forget about whoever came before, that you'd learn to love me eventually. I was stupid enough to believe her. She pulled the engagement ring off her finger, the modest diamond he'd chosen, because it had felt wrong to spend extravagantly on something that wasn't real. She set it on his desk with a soft click. I hope she was worth it, Victoria said. The woman you destroyed yourself over. She was, Jeff replied. She is. Even if she never forgives me, even if she spends the rest of her life hating me, she was worth every moment we had together. Victoria left without another word, taking with her the last pretense of the life his mother had planned for him. Jeff waited until midnight, then drove to his mother's estate in the suburbs. The mansion sat on 5 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, every inch of it designed to project wealth and power. He'd grown up in this house, had learned from birth that the family name and reputation mattered more than anything else. He'd learned all the wrong lessons. His mother was still awake, sitting in her study, reviewing paperwork. She looked up when he entered, her expression cool and controlled. Helen Vance had built an empire through strategic investments and ruthless business decisions. She'd never apologized for her methods, had always insisted that sentiment was a weakness successful people couldn't afford. Jeffrey, it's late. "I saw Ashlyn today," he said without preamble. His mother's face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, guilt, or perhaps just annoyance at having an old problem resurface. "I thought we'd moved past all that unfortunate business," she said carefully. "Unfortunate business," Jeff repeated, his voice hollow. "Is that what you call having someone beaten? Having their hands destroyed? Causing them to lose their baby?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't." The word came out harder than he'd intended. "Don't insult me by lying. Not now. Not about this." His mother set down her papers, folding her hands on the desk. "That woman was going to ruin your life, trap you with a pregnancy, destroy everything we'd built for you." "She loved me," Jeff said, his voice breaking. "We loved each other. We wanted that baby." "She was using you," his mother countered, "a girl from nowhere with nothing, who saw an opportunity to marry into money. I protected you from making a catastrophic mistake." "By having her attacked? By destroying her hands? By causing her to lose our child?" "I did what was necessary to protect my son." The casual admission nearly brought Jeff to his knees. He'd known, somewhere deep in his gut, but hearing her confirm it was something else entirely. His mother had ordered violence against the woman he loved, had orchestrated the destruction of an innocent life, and she showed no remorse whatsoever. "You're a monster," he said quietly. "I'm a mother who loves her son," she replied. "One day, when you have children of your own, you'll understand that sometimes love requires difficult choices." "No," Jeff said. "Love doesn't require cruelty. It doesn't require violence. What you did wasn't love. It was control." "And where has your precious Ashlyn ended up?" his mother asked, her tone sharp. "If she's so special, so worthy of your devotion, surely she's accomplished something with her life." "She owns the most successful custom jewelry boutique in the city," Jeff said. "Bruce Designs. Celebrities fly in from around the world to commission her work. She rebuilt her career from nothing after you tried to destroy her. She survived you, Mother, and she became extraordinary despite everything you did to break her." For the first time, his mother's composure slipped. "Bruce Designs is hers? You know the name?" "I know she's turned down 3 purchase offers from major jewelry corporations in the past year," his mother said slowly. "I know she's worth millions. I had no idea the owner was your little design student." "Her name is Ashlyn Bruce," Jeff said, "and she's not mine. She was never mine to own. She was my partner, my equal, the woman I was supposed to marry and build a life with, until you took that away from both of us." "I gave you the life you have now," his mother argued. "Your position at the firm, your reputation, your engagement to Victoria, who comes from a family that will strengthen our business connections." "I just broke off my engagement to Victoria," Jeff said, "and I'm going to find a way to make this right with Ashlyn, even if it costs me everything." His mother stood, her expression hardening. "If you pursue this, if you try to dredge up the past, you'll lose your position at the firm. I'll make sure you're cut off from the family fortune. You'll have nothing." "I already have nothing," Jeff replied, "because I chose your money and your approval over the woman I loved. I let you convince me she'd betrayed me when all she'd done was love me. I abandoned her when she needed me most. Everything I have now is built on that betrayal, and it means less than nothing." He turned to leave, done with this conversation, done with the life his mother had crafted for him. "Jeffrey," his mother called after him, "you're making a mistake. She'll never forgive you. Women like her, they hold grudges. They'll make you pay forever." "Good," Jeff said from the doorway. "I should pay. For the rest of my life, I should pay for what I let happen to her." He drove back to his apartment in the city, his hand shaking on the wheel. When he finally made it inside, he collapsed on his couch and let himself feel the full weight of what he'd done, what he'd lost, what he'd been too blind and cowardly to protect. Ashlyn had been pregnant with their child. His mother had ordered her beaten so severely that she'd lost the baby and nearly lost the use of her hands permanently. And instead of fighting for her, instead of demanding to know the truth, he'd believed a convenient lie and walked away. He'd chosen comfort over courage, money over morality, and Ashlyn had paid the price for his weakness. Jeff pulled out his phone, opened a search engine, and typed in Bruce Designs. The boutique's website was elegant and professional, showcasing Ashlyn's work with artistic photography. Each piece was a masterwork, intricate designs that spoke to a level of skill that had somehow transcended brutal injury. She'd become better than she'd been before, had turned her survival into art. There was a biography section. He clicked on it, dreading what he might find. The photo showed Ashlyn holding a small boy. The caption read, "Ashlyn Bruce, founder and creative director of Bruce Designs with her son Justin." Her son, not their son. The boy couldn't be theirs because their baby had died when his mother's thugs had kicked Ashlyn until she miscarried. But she had a child now, someone else's child, or perhaps she'd adopted. The biography didn't say. Either way, she'd built a life without him, a beautiful, successful, meaningful life, and he had absolutely no right to walk back into it, asking for forgiveness or second chances. But he was going to try anyway, because the alternative was living the rest of his life knowing he'd been too much of a coward to even attempt to make things right. Chapter 4. The Empire She Built Alone. Ashlyn had always known Jeff would come back, not because she believed in fate or destiny or any of that romantic nonsense she'd stopped believing in 4 years ago, but because men like Jeff Vance, men raised with the certainty that the world would bend to accommodate them, never accepted rejection gracefully. They always came back, convinced that the right words or gesture would fix everything they'd broken. He showed up at Bruce Designs the next afternoon. Ashlyn was in her private studio, working on a custom piece for a film director who wanted something unique for his wife's anniversary. Justin was at his preschool program, the exclusive place she could barely afford when she first enrolled him, but now paid for without a second thought. The boutique was technically closed on Sundays, but she often came into work when she needed the quiet concentration that creating demanded. The security camera alert pinged on her phone. She glanced at the screen and saw Jeff standing outside her door. For a moment, she considered ignoring him. She had work to do, a life to live, and no obligation to make space for the man who'd abandoned her when she needed him most. But curiosity won out. What could he possibly say that would make any difference? What words could bridge 4 years of silence and suffering? She unlocked the door remotely, watching through the camera as he entered. He looked terrible. Good terrible, the kind of exhausted devastation that came from sleepless nights and difficult realizations. His expensive suit was rumpled. He hadn't shaved. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. She waited in her studio, not bothering to go out and greet him. Let him come to her. Let him walk through the evidence of everything she'd built without his help, without his money, without his love. He found her at her workbench, a jeweler's loop attached to her glasses, her hand steady as she set a tiny sapphire into its mounting. She didn't look up when he entered, just continued working with the same focused precision that had rebuilt her career. "Ashlyn," he said, his voice rough. "The boutique is closed on Sundays," she replied, not pausing in her work. "If you need to make an appointment, you can call during business hours." "I talked to my mother." That made her pause. She set down her tools carefully, removed her loop, and finally looked at him. "Did you?" She admitted it. Everything. The attack, your hands, the baby. He was struggling to maintain composure, his words coming out uneven. "I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry, Ashlyn." "You're sorry," she repeated, her tone flat. 4 years later, after I rebuilt my entire life, after I survived what your mother did to me, you're sorry." "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know what she'd done." "You didn't ask," Ashlyn said, the same word she'd used when he showed up with his fiancée. "I disappeared from your life overnight and you didn't question it. Didn't come looking. Didn't wonder if I was okay. She showed me evidence that you'd taken money to leave. Bank statements, emails. It all looked real. And you believed it." Ashlyn stood, facing him across the workbench. "The woman you claimed to love, the woman carrying your child, and you believed she'd take a payoff instead of trusting what we had together. I was young, stupid. I let my mother manipulate me because it was easier than fighting her." "I was young too," Ashlyn said, "and pregnant, and terrified. And I didn't have the luxury of being stupid or choosing the easy path. I had two men break into my apartment and destroy my hands because your mother wanted me gone. They told me you sent them. They said you didn't want me or our baby." Jeff's face crumpled. "Ashlyn, I lost the baby that night," she continued, her voice steady despite the old pain clawing at her chest. "Did your mother tell you that part? How her hired thugs kicked me until I miscarried? How I spent hours bleeding on my apartment floor before anyone found me?" Jesus. He reached for her, but she stepped back, putting more distance between them. "Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me." "What can I do?" he asked desperately. "Tell me how to fix this. Tell me how to make it right." "You can't." Ashlyn wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture she hated but couldn't control. "Some things don't get fixed, Jeff. Some things just stay broken." "I'll destroy her," he said, his voice turning hard. "I'll go to the police. I'll testify against her. She'll pay for what she did to you." "Will she?" Ashlyn laughed, the sound bitter. "Your mother is wealthy and connected. She probably paid those men in cash and made sure there's no trail leading back to her. And even if you could prove it, even if she went to prison, it wouldn't give me back what I lost. It wouldn't erase 4 years of pain." "What about Justin?" Jeff asked. Did you... "Justin is not your concern," Ashlyn said sharply. "He's my son, my responsibility, my family." But she could see the math working in his head. Justin was around 3 years old. If she'd gotten pregnant again shortly after losing their baby, if she'd kept that child despite everything, then Justin could be Jeff's son. The possibility was clearly tearing him apart. Let him suffer with the uncertainty. Let him feel a fraction of what she'd endured. "I need to know," Jeff said. "Please, is he mine?" "Why?" Ashlyn demanded. "What difference does it make? You walked away. You chose to believe I'd betrayed you instead of fighting for us. You don't get to waltz back into my life now and demand answers about my son. Because if he's mine, I have a right." "You have no rights," Ashlyn interrupted. "You gave up any rights when you disappeared, when you blocked my number, when you moved across the country to get away from the mess you thought I was." They stood in silence, the air between them crackling with unresolved anger and grief. Jeff looked like he wanted to argue, to push, but something in her expression must have convinced him to back down. "I'm sorry," he said again, the words inadequate and useless. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. That if I could go back and make different choices, I would. I'd choose you. Every time I'd choose you." "But you didn't," Ashlyn said quietly. "When it mattered, when I needed you most, you chose your mother's approval and your comfortable life. You chose to believe a lie because it was easier than loving me through the hard parts." "I was a coward." "Yes," she agreed. "You were, and I was the one who paid for your cowardice." Jeff's shoulders sagged in defeat. "What do you want from me? Tell me what you need." "I want you to leave," Ashlyn said. "I want you to walk out of my boutique and my life and never come back. I want you to marry your perfect society bride and live your perfect society life and forget I exist again." "I broke off the engagement with Victoria." Ashlyn blinked, surprised despite herself. "Why would you do that?" "Because I don't love her. I never loved her. My mother pushed us together because Victoria's family has connections she wanted. I said yes because it was expected. Because it was easy, because I've spent 4 years trying to convince myself I could build a life that didn't include you." "That's not my problem," Ashlyn said, though something in her chest twisted at his words. "I know. I'm not telling you this because I expect anything from you. I'm telling you because you deserve honesty. You deserved it 4 years ago, and I failed you. I won't make that mistake again." "What do you want, Jeff, really? Because if you're hoping for some dramatic reunion where I fall into your arms and forgive everything, that's not happening. I'm not the woman I was 4 years ago. That woman died the night your mother's thugs destroyed my hands." "I can see that," Jeff said softly. "You're stronger now, harder. You've built something incredible here. something that has nothing to do with me or my family or our past, and I'm proud of you for that, even though I have no right to be." Ashlyn didn't know how to respond to that. She'd expected anger, excuses, attempts at manipulation. She hadn't expected genuine admiration or this raw honesty that made it harder to maintain her walls. "I just want a chance," Jeff continued. "Not to be with you, not to fix what's broken between us, just to be in your life somehow, to prove that I'm not the same man who walked away, to make sure you and Justin have everything you need." "We don't need anything from you," Ashlyn said firmly. "I've built Bruce Designs into a multi-million-dollar business. I own this building. I have a penthouse apartment and enough money to give Justin every opportunity. We're fine without you." "I know you are," Jeff said, "but maybe I need this. Maybe I need to prove to myself that I can be better than the coward I was 4 years ago." "Your redemption isn't my responsibility." "No," he agreed. "It's mine. But I'm asking anyway. Please, let me try." Ashlyn studied him, this man who'd once been everything to her and who now felt like a stranger. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the genuine regret in the set of his shoulders. She also saw the privilege that had allowed him to walk away from their relationship without consequences, the same privilege that was giving him the audacity to ask for a second chance now. But beneath all that, she saw something else. The boy she'd fallen in love with at that gallery opening, the one who'd laughed at her honest opinions and asked for her number with genuine nervousness. That boy was still in there somewhere, buried under years of poor choices and family pressure. The question was whether she could trust that any part of him was worth salvaging. "I'll think about it," she said finally, hating herself for not telling him to leave and never come back. "Thank you," Jeff said, relief flooding his features. "Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided anything, and even if I do allow you some limited presence in our lives, it doesn't mean forgiveness. It doesn't mean we're going back to what we were. That's gone. That's dead. You killed it when you chose to believe your mother over me." "I understand." "Do you?" Ashlyn challenged. "Because I'm not sure you understand what you took from me. I lost our baby. I lost the use of my hands for months. I lost my scholarship, my apartment, my entire future. I had to rebuild myself from nothing while you went on with your life like I'd never existed. That's not something you apologize for and move on from." "I know," Jeff said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, even if you never forgive me." Ashlyn turned back to her workbench, effectively dismissing him. "Leave your contact information with my assistant when she comes in tomorrow. If I decide to allow you any involvement, I'll reach out. Until then, stay away from me and stay away from Justin." She heard him leave, heard the quiet click of the door closing behind him. Only then did she let her hands start shaking, let the tears she'd been holding back finally fall. He'd walked back into her life and torn open wounds she'd thought had healed. He'd reminded her of everything she'd lost, everything his cowardice had cost her. And the worst part was that some small, stupid part of her heart still remembered what it felt like to love him. But love wasn't enough. It had never been enough, and she refused to be foolish enough to make that mistake twice. Chapter 5. The Fiancé Who Knows. Victoria Ashford had always known she was second choice. Women like her, raised in the right circles with the right education and the right connections, learned early to recognize the signs. Jeff Vance had been attentive but never passionate, affectionate but never consumed. He'd proposed because it made sense, not because he couldn't imagine his life without her. She'd accepted because sometimes practical was enough. Except now she was sitting in her penthouse apartment, alone, staring at the engagement ring she'd placed back on her finger after leaving Jeff's office. She'd taken it off in a moment of pride and anger, but pride didn't keep you warm at night. Pride didn't secure the merger between her family's real estate empire and the Vance investment firm. Her mother had made that abundantly clear over breakfast this morning. "You let him break off the engagement?" Eleanor Ashford's voice had been ice cold. "After everything we've invested in this relationship? After all the society announcements, the venue deposits, the connections we've cultivated?" "He's in love with someone else," Victoria had replied, pushing her eggs around her plate. Has been for years, apparently. Men are always in love with someone else, her mother had said dismissively. That's not a reason to end an engagement. You make him forget. You give him children and social obligations and a life so full he doesn't have time to pine after whatever little fantasy he's been holding on to. But Victoria had seen Jeff's face when he talked about Aislinn Bruce. She'd watched him come undone at the mention of broken hands and lost babies. That wasn't a simple infatuation. That was a wound that had never healed, a loss he'd never processed. She couldn't compete with a ghost, except Aislinn Bruce wasn't a ghost. She was very much alive, running a successful business, raising a child, living a full life without Jeff Vance, which meant Victoria still had a chance to salvage this situation. She needed more information first. Victoria hired a private investigator on Monday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, she had a comprehensive file on Aislinn Bruce and Bruce Designs. The information was both impressive and concerning. Aislinn had built her business from nothing after what appeared to be a catastrophic injury 4 years ago. Hospital records showed she'd been admitted with severe trauma to both hands, multiple fractures, and internal injuries consistent with assault. No arrests had been made. The case had gone cold within weeks. The timeline matched up perfectly with when Jeff claimed to have broken up with Aislinn, which meant his mother had orchestrated an attack brutal enough to nearly destroy a woman's career and caused her to lose a pregnancy. Victoria felt sick reading the details. She'd always known Helen Vance was ruthless in business. The woman had built her fortune through cutthroat investments and strategic destruction of competitors. But having someone beaten, causing a miscarriage, that crossed a line from ruthless into criminal. The file also contained information about Justin Bruce, age 3, legally adopted by Aislinn 2 years ago following her sister's death during childbirth. No biological connection to Jeff Vance, so the child wasn't Jeff's, which meant his obsession with Aislinn wasn't about co-parenting or custody battles. It was purely about unfinished emotional business. Victoria could work with that. She went to Bruce Designs on Thursday afternoon, dressed in her most expensive outfit, armor made of designer labels and generational wealth. The boutique was stunning, each display case a work of art, the jewelry itself extraordinary. She understood immediately why Aislinn had refused to sell that particular design. These pieces weren't just accessories, they were statements of survival and strength. Aislinn was with a client when Victoria entered. She watched the other woman work, noting the careful way she handled the jewelry, the slight tremor in her hands that spoke to old injuries that never fully healed. Aislinn was beautiful in a way Victoria had never been, with a warmth and authenticity that no amount of money could buy. She was also clearly deeply talented. The piece she was showing the client was breathtaking. When the client left with a receipt for a custom commission worth more than Victoria's car, Aislinn finally acknowledged her presence. "Victoria," she said, her tone professionally neutral, "I wasn't expecting to see you again." "I came to apologize," Victoria said, the lie smooth on her tongue. "My behavior the other day was inexcusable. I was upset about being refused the commission, but that's no excuse for how I acted." Aislinn studied her with eyes that saw too much. "Your apology is noted. Is there anything else?" "I wanted to understand," Victoria continued, moving deeper into the boutique. "Jeff told me about your history, about what his mother did to you. I'm horrified, truly." "Are you?" Aislinn's tone suggested she didn't believe that for a second. "I am," Victoria insisted. "I may have been raised with privilege, but I'm not a monster. What happened to you was criminal. Helen Vance should be in prison. And yet she's not," Aislinn said flatly. "Because people like the Vance family don't face consequences for their actions. They just pay people like me to disappear." "Except you didn't disappear," Victoria observed. "You built this instead. You turned what she did to you into something powerful." "I survived," Aislinn corrected. "There's a difference between surviving and winning." Victoria picked up a piece from the display, a delicate necklace with sapphires arranged in a constellation pattern. "This is exquisite. You're extraordinarily talented. Is there a point to this visit?" Ashlyn asked, her patience clearly wearing thin. Because if you're here to convince me to give Jeff another chance, you're wasting your time. Actually, I'm here to convince you to leave him alone, Victoria said, setting down the necklace and meeting Ashlyn's gaze directly. He's broken off our engagement because he's convinced himself that you're the one who got away, that if he can just apologize enough, prove himself enough, you'll somehow forgive him and take him back. That's not going to happen. I know that. You know that. But Jeff doesn't seem to understand it yet. And while he's busy chasing a fantasy of redemption, my life is falling apart. My family is furious. The merger we'd planned is in jeopardy. I'm being publicly humiliated as the woman who wasn't enough to make him forget his old girlfriend. Again, not my problem, Ashlyn said, though her expression had softened slightly. I didn't ask Jeff to break off your engagement. I didn't ask him to come back into my life. I was fine before he showed up, and I'll be fine after he realizes I'm serious about wanting nothing to do with him. Will you? Victoria challenged, because from what I understand he's very persistent, and he's convinced himself that destroying his relationship with his mother and throwing away his engagement means something, that it proves he's changed. All it proves is that he's finally experiencing consequences for his choices, Ashlyn replied. 4 years late, but better than never. Victoria studied the other woman, recognizing someone who'd learned to protect themselves through hard experience. She could respect that, even if it complicated her own plans. I'm not asking you to take him back, Victoria said carefully. I'm asking you to tell him definitively that there's no chance, that no amount of apologies or grand gestures will change your mind. Give him closure so he can move on. I already told him that. Tell him again. Make it clear enough that even someone as stubborn as Jeff Vance can't misinterpret it, because right now he's clinging to the hope that if he just tries hard enough, you'll forgive him. And that hope is destroying any chance he and I might have at salvaging something from this mess. Ashlyn was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. You still want to marry him, after knowing he's in love with someone else? I want the life we were supposed to build together, Victoria said honestly. The partnership, the merger of our families, the social position. Maybe that sounds cold to you, but not everyone gets to marry for love. Some of us make practical choices. I'm familiar with practical choices, Ashlyn said dryly. I make them every day. But marrying someone who doesn't love you isn't practical. It's torture. Perhaps. But it's my torture to endure. Justin emerged from the back room then, where he'd apparently been playing during Ashlyn's client meeting. He was a beautiful child, with his mother's eyes and a smile that could light up a room. He went straight to Ashlyn, wrapping his small arms around her legs. Mama, I'm hungry. We'll get lunch soon, baby, Ashlyn said, her entire demeanor softening as she looked at her son. Go pick out your favorite book, and I'll read to you while we eat. Victoria watched the interaction, seeing the fierce love Ashlyn had for this child. It was the same kind of love she'd seen in Jeff's eyes when he talked about Ashlyn, consuming, protective, absolute. She'd never inspire that kind of love in anyone. The realization should have hurt more than it did. He's not Jeff's, Victoria observed after Justin disappeared back into the office. No, Ashlyn confirmed. He's my sister's son. She died giving birth to him. He's all I have left of my family. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you? Ashlyn's voice had gone cold again. Or are you just relieved that there's no custody battle to complicate things? Both can be true. Ashlyn moved behind the counter, creating distance between them. I'll make you a deal. I'll tell Jeff one more time that there's no chance of reconciliation, that I want nothing to do with him now or ever. I'll be clear enough that even his stubborn ass will have to accept it. And in exchange, you leave me alone. No more visits, no more attempts at manipulation or persuasion. You take Jeff and whatever relationship you can salvage with him, and you stay out of my life. Victoria considered the offer. It wasn't everything she wanted, but it was more than she'd expected to get. Agreed. She left Bruce Designs feeling hollow but determined. She'd come here looking for a way to secure her future, and she'd found it. Ashlyn would shut Jeff down. He'd realize his fantasy of redemption was impossible, and eventually maybe he'd come back to Victoria and the practical life they'd planned together. It wasn't love, but Victoria had stopped believing in love when she was 13 and watched her father leave her mother for his secretary, destroying their family in pursuit of passion that burned out within 2 years. Practical was safer, practical lasted, and if Jeff never looked at her the way he'd looked at Ashlyn when he said her name, well, Victoria had survived worse disappointments. Chapter 6. The Father Who Wants In. Jeff received the message from Ashlyn 3 days after his conversation with Victoria. "Come to the boutique tomorrow at 6 p.m. We need to talk. Come alone." He'd spent those 3 days in a strange limbo, uncertain what his future held. He'd moved out of his apartment, the one his mother had helped him secure, and into a smaller place downtown. He'd started separating his finances from the family firm, a process that would take months and cost him significant wealth. His mother had made good on her threat to cut him off, freezing his access to the family trust and removing him from the board of directors. He'd lost everything, and somehow he felt freer than he had in years. He arrived at Bruce Designs at exactly 6 o'clock. The boutique was closed, the interior lights dimmed, but he could see Ashlyn sitting at her workbench in the back studio. She buzzed him in without a word. "Thank you for seeing me," Jeff said as he entered the studio. "Sit," Ashlyn commanded, gesturing to a chair across from her workbench. "And listen, because I'm only saying this once." Jeff sat, his heart pounding. "Victoria came to see me," Ashlyn began. "She asked me to give you closure, to make it absolutely clear that there's no chance of reconciliation between us, that no amount of apologies or changed behavior will make me forgive you for what you did." Jeff felt something inside him crack. "I understand. I don't think you do," Ashlyn continued, "because you keep showing up, you keep pushing. You broke off your engagement like that proves something. You've cut ties with your mother like that earns you points. But none of it changes the fundamental fact that you abandoned me when I needed you most." "I know. Do you?" Ashlyn's voice rose. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to ease your guilt. You want me to forgive you so you can feel better about yourself, so you can move on with your life without this hanging over you. But my forgiveness isn't about you. My pain isn't about you. My survival isn't about you." "You're right," Jeff said quietly. "Everything you're saying is right. I was selfish 4 years ago and I'm being selfish now. I want forgiveness because it would make me feel less like a monster. I want a second chance because I hate who I was and who I became after losing you." "That's honest, at least." Jeff leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "But it's not just about me. It's about Justin, too." Ashlyn's expression hardened. "Justin is not your concern. I know he's not mine biologically. I know you adopted him after your sister died, but I also know what it's like to grow up without a father. My dad died when I was young, and my mother filled that void with expectations and manipulation. I don't want that for Justin." "Justin has me," Ashlyn said firmly. "He has a mother who loves him unconditionally. He doesn't need a father who will only stick around when it's convenient." "What if I could prove that I'd stick around? What if I could show you that I'm not the same man who walked away?" "How?" Ashlyn challenged. "How could you possibly prove that?" "Let me be in his life. Not as a father, not as anything official, just as someone who shows up, consistently, reliably. Let me prove through actions instead of words that I've changed." Ashlyn was quiet for a long time, studying him with those intelligent eyes that had always seen through his bullshit. "Why do you care about Justin, really? Is this about him or about getting closer to me?" "Honestly, both," Jeff admitted. "I care about him because he's yours, because you love him, because he deserves every good thing in the world, but I also see him as a chance to do better, to be the kind of man who shows up instead of running away." "That's not fair to him. Using a 3-year-old as your redemption project." "You're right, it's not fair, but I'm asking anyway, not for my sake, for his, because I have resources, connections. I could help with his education, his opportunities, his future." "We don't need your money," Ashlyn said coldly. "I've built a successful business. Justin will have every opportunity without the Vance family's help. I know, but what about time? What about someone who can be there when you're working? Someone who can take him to the park or read him stories or just be another adult who cares about him?" Ashlyn stood abruptly, pacing the small studio. "You're asking me to trust you with my son, the most precious thing in my life, after you proved 4 years ago that you can't be trusted when things get difficult. I'm not that person anymore." "Prove it," Ashlyn said, turning to face him. "Not with words, not with grand gestures. Prove it by showing up every day and doing the work. Prove it by being there when it's inconvenient and boring and hard. Prove it by putting Justin's needs above your own desire for redemption." "I will," Jeff said, standing to face her. "However long it takes. Whatever it requires, I'll prove it." "You get 1 hour a week," Ashlyn said, her voice hard. "Supervised visits, at my apartment. You show up when you say you will. You leave when I tell you to. And the first time you disappoint him, the first time you prove you're still the same unreliable coward you were 4 years ago, you're done. No second chances, no explanations, just done." It was more than he'd hoped for and less than he wanted. "I'll take it. Thank you." "Don't thank me," Ashlyn said bitterly. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because Victoria asked me to make it clear there's no hope between us, and this is me making it clear. You can be in Justin's life as a mentor or family friend or whatever we decide to call it, but you will never be in my life as anything more than the father of the child I lost, the man who chose wrong when it mattered most." The words hit like physical blows, but Jeff accepted them. This was his penance. This was the price of his cowardice. "When can I start?" he asked. "Saturday, 2 o'clock. I'll text you the address. Show up sober, show up on time, and for God's sake, don't bring expensive presents. He doesn't need things. He needs consistency." "I understand." Ashlyn walked him to the door, maintaining careful distance between them. At the threshold, she stopped, looking up at him with eyes that held so much pain it nearly broke him. "I loved you," she said quietly. "4 years ago, I loved you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I would have done anything for you, built any life you wanted, been whoever you needed me to be." "I know," Jeff whispered. "And you threw it away because your mother told you to. Because it was easier to believe a lie than fight for us. That's not something I can forgive. That's not something time or good behavior will erase. So when you show up on Saturday, when you start building a relationship with Justin, remember that it's not a path back to me. It's not a second chance at what we had. That's dead. You killed it. This is just you trying to be a better person going forward." "I understand," Jeff said, even though understanding didn't make it hurt less. He left the boutique and walked through the city streets, his hands shoved in his pockets, his heart simultaneously full and empty. He'd gotten what he asked for, a chance to prove himself, permission to be in Justin's life, and absolute confirmation that Ashlyn would never love him again. It should have felt like defeat, but somehow it felt like the first honest thing that had happened to him in 4 years. No illusions, no false hope, just the brutal truth that some mistakes couldn't be unmade. All he could do now was try to minimize the damage going forward. Saturday arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. Jeff spent the intervening days researching child development and age-appropriate activities. He felt ridiculous and terrified, preparing for 1 hour with a 3-year-old like it was a business presentation. But this mattered more than any business deal he'd ever negotiated. Ashlyn's apartment building was in one of the city's nicest neighborhoods, secure and well-maintained. The doorman checked Jeff's ID against a list before allowing him up. Even that small detail, the fact that Ashlyn had pre-cleared his visit, felt significant. She answered the door in jeans and a sweater, casual and beautiful, and completely closed off to him. "You're on time." "I said I would be." Justin peeked around her legs, curious about the visitor. He was smaller than Jeff had expected, his eyes wide and cautious. "Justin, this is Jeff," Ashlyn said, her hand protective on her son's shoulder. "He's going to spend some time with us today. Is that okay?" Justin nodded slowly, still uncertain. Jeff knelt down to the boy's level, maintaining a respectful distance. "Hi, Justin. Your mum said you like books. I brought one I thought you might enjoy." He pulled out a picture book about constellations, chosen carefully because Ashlyn had always loved astronomy. Justin's eyes lit up at the sight of the stars on the cover. "Can we read it?" Justin asked, looking up at his mother for permission. "Of course, baby," Ashlyn said, guiding them toward the living room. The hour passed in a strange sort of peace. Jeff read to Justin, his voice careful and warm. He answered the boy's endless questions about stars and planets and whether astronauts got lonely in space. Ashlyn sat nearby, ostensibly working on her laptop, but clearly monitoring every interaction. Justin warmed up gradually, moving from sitting on the other side of the couch to eventually leaning against Jeff's arm as he turned pages. The trust was tentative and precious, and Jeff felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a blanket. When the hour was up, Ashlyn stood. "Time to say goodbye." "Already?" Justin's disappointment was clear. "Jeff has other things to do," Ashlyn said gently, "but he'll come back next week. Right, Jeff?" "Right," Jeff confirmed, meeting her eyes over Justin's head. "Same time next Saturday." He left feeling both lighter and heavier than when he'd arrived. He'd proven he could show up. He'd connected with Justin, seen the beginnings of trust forming, but he'd also seen Ashlyn's walls, higher and stronger than ever, completely impenetrable. This was his life now. Stolen hours with a child who wasn't his. Polite distance from the woman he loved. Penance without forgiveness. And somehow, it still felt like the most important thing he'd ever done. Chapter 7. The Trial That Costs Him Everything. Jeff had been building the case against his mother for 2 months in secret. He'd gathered evidence methodically, using insider knowledge of her business practices to trace payments that connected to the men who'd attacked Ashlyn. Financial records showed large cash withdrawals around the time of the incident. He'd found witnesses willing to testify about his mother's threats against people who got in her way. He'd built a case strong enough that the district attorney agreed to reopen Ashlyn's assault investigation. He hadn't told Ashlyn any of this. The mistake revealed itself when the DA's office called her on a Tuesday morning, asking her to testify at the grand jury hearing. They mentioned evidence provided by Jeff Vance that would support her case, the case she'd never agreed to pursue. Jeff arrived for his scheduled Saturday visit to find Ashlyn's door locked. She answered his knock with fury carved into every line of her face. "You filed charges without asking me?" Jeff's stomach dropped. "Can I come in? I can explain." "No." Ashlyn stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her so Justin wouldn't hear. "You don't get to make decisions about my trauma. You don't get to drag me through a trial without my consent. This is exactly what you did 4 years ago. I was trying to get you justice, by forcing me to relive the worst night of my life in public, by making me testify about how I was beaten and lost our baby, by turning my pain into evidence for lawyers to dissect." Her voice shook with rage. "You made a unilateral decision that affects my life without consulting me. I have evidence, financial records that trace back to her. We can put her in prison." "And what does that cost me?" Ashlyn demanded. "My privacy? My peace? Justin's sense of security when reporters start asking questions? You're so focused on your guilt that you're not thinking about actual consequences for me and my son." The comparison to 4 years ago hit him like a slap. She was right. He'd trampled her agency in his rush to prove he'd changed, committing the same sin in reverse. "I'm sorry," he said. "You're right. I should have asked what you wanted." "Yes, you should have." Ashlyn's anger gave way to something worse. Exhaustion, disappointment. "I need you to leave. Ashlyn, please." "No, leave. I need to decide if I can trust you at all." Jeff wanted to argue, to explain his intentions, but he'd lost that right. "I'll withdraw the evidence, whatever you want." "What I want is for you to have asked before starting any of this," Ashlyn said wearily. "But since you can't undo it, I need time. The DA said I don't have to testify, that your evidence might be enough on its own." It is, Jeff confirmed. The financial trail is clear. So you've condemned your mother without my permission, made yourself the hero of a story that was mine to tell. She looked at him with eyes that held no softness. And you think that's making amends? No, I think I made another terrible mistake. I need you to go through with it, Ashlyn said quietly. If you withdraw now, it means nothing. The investigation gets dropped. Your mother wins, so you'll testify. You'll put her in prison, and you'll live with knowing you did it for yourself, not for me. I was trying. Intent doesn't matter when the impact is harm, Ashlyn interrupted. The visits with Justin are done. You need to stay away from us until after the trial. I need to protect him from whatever circus this becomes, and I need distance from you while I figure out if you've actually changed or if you're just better at justifying the same selfish behavior. Please don't take Justin away. I love him. You should have thought about that before making decisions that affect our lives without asking. Ashlyn opened her apartment door. Goodbye, Jeff. The finality in her voice destroyed him. The grand jury hearing happened 3 days later. Jeff testified for 4 hours, providing evidence that traced his mother's payments to a shell company employing the men who'd attacked Ashlyn. He detailed conversations about eliminating problems. He handed over emails and financial records, proving a pattern of violence to protect family interests. His mother sat in the courtroom, expression carved from ice. She didn't look angry or afraid. She looked like he'd failed her expectations one final time. The grand jury indicted her on assault, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. Bail was set impossibly high. For the first time in her life, Helen Vance faced consequences she couldn't buy her way out of. The media descended like vultures. Jeff's phone rang constantly with reporters, business associates, former friends. The Vance family name was dragged through every news cycle. Colleagues distanced themselves, clients pulled accounts. By the end of the week, Jeff had lost his position at the firm, his remaining family connections, and the last vestiges of his former life. The trial began 8 weeks later. Jeff testified again, his words careful and factual. The defense painted him as a vengeful son, but the financial trail was too clear. Helen Vance had used wealth to harm people who inconvenienced her. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Jeff felt nothing watching his mother sentenced to 8 years in prison. No satisfaction, no vindication, just hollow acknowledgement that justice didn't heal wounds already scarred. He texted Ashlyn that night. The verdict came in, guilty on all counts. She didn't respond. He tried again 2 days later. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I needed you to know that I understand what I did wrong. I took away your choice. Again, I'm sorry. No response. A week passed, then 2. Jeff stopped texting, stopped hoping for forgiveness, stopped believing he deserved any contact with the family he'd grown to love. Victoria called him 3 weeks after the verdict. You actually did it. Destroyed your entire family for a woman who won't even speak to you. I destroyed my family because they committed crimes, Jeff corrected. Ashlyn has nothing to do with it. Doesn't she? This whole crusade was about proving you'd changed. Maybe it started that way, Jeff admitted, but it needed to happen regardless. My mother hurt people. Someone needed to stop her. Victoria was quiet for a moment. There's a position opening at my family's firm. Real estate development, entry level. The pay is terrible, but it's honest work. Jeff was stunned. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of being angry, and because someone who'll destroy their life to do the right thing, even if they do it wrong, deserves a chance to rebuild. She paused. Also because I saw what your mother did to that woman. The hospital records, the photos. What happened to Ashlyn was evil. You're an idiot for how you went about getting justice, but at least you tried. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The job is hard and the hours are brutal. She hung up before he could say anything else. Jeff sat in his small apartment surrounded by ruins of his former life and felt something unexpected, not happiness, but purpose. A path forward not built on family money or privilege. He'd lost everything trying to make amends. And in losing, he'd found the first genuine thing he'd done in 4 years. Even if Ashlyn never forgave him, even if he never saw Justin again, he'd done the right thing, however clumsily, and he'd have to live with the cost of doing it without her permission. 3 months after the trial, Jeff saw Ashlyn at a coffee shop near her boutique. She was alone, working on her laptop, a cup of tea going cold beside her. He almost left without saying anything, but she looked up and their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. Then Ashlyn did something he didn't expect. She nodded, just once. A small acknowledgement of his existence. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation. Just recognition that he was still alive, and she didn't hate him enough to pretend otherwise. Jeff nodded back and left. It was the only contact they had for the next 9 months. Chapter 8. The Year of Silence. Jeff learned what loneliness actually meant during the year he spent without Ashlyn and Justin. Not the comfortable solitude of chosen isolation, but the bone-deep ache of losing something irreplaceable and having no one to blame but yourself. The job at Victoria's family firm was exactly as advertised. Entry-level grunt work reviewing property assessments and market analyses. He made coffee runs for analysts younger than him. He filed paperwork and stayed until midnight learning a business he knew nothing about. His co-workers treated him with cautious distance. Everyone knew who he was, the Vance heir who'd testified against his own mother, the man whose family name was synonymous with corruption now. They weren't hostile, just careful, waiting to see if privilege would reassert itself or if his humility was genuine. Jeff kept his head down and worked. His apartment was a studio in a neighborhood his former self would have considered slumming. Small kitchen, narrow windows, radiator that clanked through winter nights. He could have afforded better, even on his reduced salary, but he was saving every extra dollar. Not for himself. For a college fund he'd opened in Justin's name. For donations to organizations supporting assault survivors. For the eventual day when he might be allowed to help with Justin's expenses, if that day ever came. He went to therapy twice a week. His counselor was a no-nonsense woman who didn't let him wallow in guilt or self-pity. "You're here because you made mistakes," she said during their first session. "The question is whether you're committed to actually changing or just performing change to ease your conscience." "I don't know the difference anymore," Jeff admitted. "Then we'll figure it out together." The work was hard. Excavating the patterns that had led him to abandon Ashlyn 4 years ago, to make decisions for her instead of with her. The entitled assumption that he knew best. The cowardice dressed up as practicality. The choosing of comfort over courage. "You're doing this to get her back," his therapist observed after 3 months. "Yes," Jeff said honestly. "That's not going to work. Real change happens when you become better for yourself, not for external validation." "Then I'm doing it wrong." "You're doing it human," she corrected, "but you need to ask yourself, if Ashlyn never speaks to you again, if you never see Justin, would you still want to be this person you're trying to become?" Jeff sat with that question for weeks. The answer revealed itself slowly. Yes, he would. Because the man he'd been was hollow, built on inherited wealth and unearned confidence. The man he was becoming, forged through loss and honest work, felt real in a way he'd never experienced. He started volunteering at a youth center in Ashlyn's neighborhood. Not to run into her, not to engineer chance meetings, but because the work mattered. Teaching kids chess, helping with homework, being a steady adult presence for children who didn't have many. 6 months into his year of silence, Jeff almost broke. A junior analyst at work had made a mistake on a major deal. Not malicious, just inexperienced. The kind of error that could cost the firm millions if not corrected quickly. Jeff's first instinct was to fix it himself. Quietly, efficiently, take over and solve the problem without consulting anyone. He'd actually opened the files and started making corrections before he recognized the pattern. This was exactly what he'd done to Ashlyn. Seen a problem, decided he knew the solution, acted unilaterally without considering anyone else's agency. Jeff closed the files, called his supervisor, explained the situation, and let the firm's leadership decide how to handle it. The analyst was mortified. but grateful. The firm fixed the error through proper channels. And Jeff learned that being helpful didn't mean taking over. It was a small moment, insignificant to anyone watching. But to Jeff, it felt like finally understanding what change actually required. He called his therapist after. "I think I get it now." "Get what?" "Why she couldn't forgive me. It's not about the big betrayal 4 years ago. It's about every small moment where I chose my judgment over her autonomy, where I decided what was best without asking. That's the real pattern I need to break." "Good," his therapist said. "Now the work gets harder." The holidays were brutal. Jeff spent Thanksgiving alone in his apartment, imagining Justin somewhere laughing and happy. He spent Christmas volunteering at a soup kitchen, serving meals to people who'd lost everything. He understood them now in a way he never had before. Loss wasn't abstract. It was waking up every day, knowing you destroyed the best thing in your life through your own choices. He saw Ashlyn twice more during that year, once at a gallery opening for local artists where her jewelry was featured. She looked stunning in a simple black dress, her work displayed like the art it was. He watched from across the room, never approaching, and left before she noticed him. The second time was at a park. He was there with kids from the youth center, teaching them to fly kites. He saw Ashlyn and Justin on the other side of the playground. Justin was bigger now, his laugh carrying across the distance. Jeff's chest ached watching them. They were a complete unit, mother and son. They didn't need him, had built a beautiful life without him. Ashlyn saw him across the playground. Their eyes met. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. She watched him with the kids for a moment, something complicated crossing her face. Then she turned back to Justin, and Jeff understood the message. "You can exist in the world, you can be a good person, but you don't get to exist in our world." He accepted it. What else could he do? 9 months into his year of silence, Victoria asked him to coffee. "You look different," she observed, studying him across the table. "I work construction on weekends now," Jeff said, "helping with Habitat for Humanity builds. Turns out I like working with my hands." "That's not what I mean. You look settled, like you've stopped waiting for something." "I have," Jeff admitted. "I spent months hoping Ashlyn would forgive me, hoping I'd get another chance, but I've accepted that's not happening. This is just who I am now, someone trying to be better because it's right, not because it gets me what I want." Victoria smiled, genuine warmth in her expression. "I'm proud of you. I know that's weird to say, but I am. Thank you for the job, for giving me a chance. You've earned it. You're the best analyst we have now. My father wants to promote you." Jeff shook his head. "I don't want promotions or advancement. I just want to do good work and go home. Keep things simple. Suit yourself." They talked for another hour about nothing important. When they parted, Victoria hugged him. "For what it's worth, I think she'd be proud too, of who you've become." "Maybe," Jeff said, "but that's not why I'm doing it anymore." And he meant it. The year mark came and went without fanfare. Jeff had stopped counting days since he'd last seen Justin, stopped imagining scenarios where Ashlyn would reach out, stopped hoping for anything except to keep being better than he was yesterday. He'd built a life, small and humble and honest. He volunteered with kids who reminded him of Justin. He worked hard at a job that meant something. He went to therapy and did the difficult work of becoming someone he could respect. And he accepted that Ashlyn and Justin were never coming back. That acceptance, paradoxically, felt like freedom, like finally letting go of the outcome and focusing on the process, like becoming someone worthy not to win her back, but because he couldn't stand being the man he used to be. Then, 13 months after Ashlyn had cut him out of her life completely, his phone rang at 2 in the morning. Her name on the screen stopped his heart. Chapter 9. The Crisis That Changes Nothing. "I'm at Children's Hospital." Ashlyn's voice was stretched thin with fear. "Justin had an allergic reaction. They have him stable, but I don't know why I called you." Jeff was already moving, pulling on clothes, grabbing his keys. "Which hospital?" "You don't have to." "Ashlyn." Which hospital? She gave him the address. Jeff drove through empty city streets, his hands steady on the wheel despite his racing heart. This wasn't about second chances or redemption. This was about a child in danger and a woman who'd carried too much alone. He found her in the pediatric waiting room, still in pajamas and a coat thrown over them, her face tear-streaked and exhausted. She was pacing, her hands trembling with old injury and new fear. "What happened?" Jeff asked gently. "I gave him peanut butter," Ashlyn said, her voice breaking. "We were trying new foods. I didn't know he was allergic. I didn't know, and I almost killed him." "This isn't your fault." "He couldn't breathe. His face swelled up and he couldn't breathe, and I had to call an ambulance. The paramedics said if I'd waited 5 more minutes..." She couldn't finish. Jeff pulled her into his arms without thinking. She fought it for a moment, her body rigid with resistance, but then fear overwhelmed her walls and she collapsed against him. "I can't lose him," she sobbed. "He's all I have. If I lose him too..." "You won't," Jeff said firmly. "Justin is strong. He's here. He's stable. You got him help in time." They stood like that while Ashlyn broke. Other families gave them privacy, recognizing crisis that transcended normal boundaries. Finally, Ashlyn pulled away, wiping her face. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called. I'm glad you did. You shouldn't go through this alone." A doctor emerged from the ICU. "Miss Bruce, Justin is awake and asking for you." Ashlyn moved toward the door, then paused. "Do you want to see him? He's been asking about you, about when you'll come read stories again." It felt like a test. Jeff wasn't going to refuse. "If you're okay with it." "Come on." Justin was small in the hospital bed, his face slightly swollen, but his eyes bright when he saw his mother. "Mama!" "Hi, baby," Ashlyn said, taking his hand carefully. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. The doctor said I get ice cream tomorrow because my throat is sore." "Whatever flavor you want." Justin noticed Jeff in the doorway. "Jeff, you came. Mama said you were busy." "I'm never too busy for you," Jeff said, meaning it. He moved closer, staying opposite from Ashlyn. "You gave your mama quite a scare." "I didn't mean to. The peanut butter made me feel funny." "I know, buddy, but the doctors fixed you up. You were very brave." Justin's face grew serious. "Mama was crying. I heard her." "That's because she loves you so much," Jeff explained. "Sometimes when people we love are scared or hurt, it makes us cry." "Do you love me too?" Jeff felt Ashlyn's eyes on him. He met her gaze before answering. "Yes, I do love you." "Then why did you stop coming?" The question hung in the air. Jeff didn't have an answer a 4-year-old would understand. Ashlyn saved him. "Jeff and I had some things to work out, but he's here now." The nurse checked Justin's vitals, giving them space. When she left, Ashlyn spoke quietly. "You can go. I know you have work. I'm not leaving unless you want me to." "I don't know what I want," Ashlyn admitted. "I called you because in that moment, terrified in the ambulance, you were the person I wanted. Not because I've forgiven you, just because some part of me still remembers when you were the person I turned to." "I'll take that. Whatever you need tonight, I'm here." They stayed through the night, taking turns sitting with Justin when he woke confused. Ashlyn dozed in the chair, never leaving her son's side. Jeff sat in the corner, available but not intrusive. Around dawn, Justin fell into deeper sleep. The doctors were pleased with his recovery. They'd keep him 1 more day for observation, but the danger had passed. Ashlyn left Justin's room, moving to the waiting area for coffee. Jeff followed at a distance. "Thank you for staying," she said, staring into terrible hospital coffee. "I wouldn't have been anywhere else." "I know. That's the problem." Ashlyn set down the cup. "You're supposed to be the villain, the man who abandoned me, who chose his mother over our baby. But then you show up at 2 in the morning when I call." "People can be more than one thing." "I'm still angry," Ashlyn said, "about the trial, about you making decisions for me without asking. That hasn't changed." "I understand. But I also watched you with those kids at the park, saw you teaching them to fly kites. You didn't know I was watching, did you?" Jeff shook his head. You looked happy, content, like you'd found something real. She studied him carefully. You're different than you were a year ago. Quieter, more settled, like you stopped performing. I stopped trying to be someone for you, Jeff said honestly. Started trying to be someone I could respect. And are you someone you respect? Getting there, some days better than others. Ashlyn was quiet for a long moment. I'm not ready to forgive you. I might never be ready. Too much happened. I know. But maybe you could see Justin again, supervised. If you prove you're reliable, maybe without supervision eventually. This isn't about us. This is about him having another adult who cares. I'll take it, whatever you're willing to give. And if you screw this up, if you disappoint him, you're done, permanently. Understood. The sun was rising, painting hospital windows pink and gold. Justin would wake soon, confused and sore but alive. And Jeff would be there, not as a hero or even a friend, but as someone trying to do better than before. It wasn't redemption, it wasn't forgiveness. But it was a door opening, just a crack, after a year of silence. And this time, Jeff knew better than to push it open before being invited. Chapter 10. The Love That Was Earned. The supervised visits resumed slowly, once a month at first, then twice. Ashlyn was cautious, watching every interaction between Jeff and Justin with careful eyes. Jeff showed up exactly when he said he would. He brought books Justin loved and helped him build elaborate block towers. He was patient when the boy was cranky, engaged when he was energetic, and never once complained about the strict time limits Ashlyn imposed. 6 months after the hospital, Ashlyn allowed unsupervised park visits. Jeff would pick Justin up on Sunday mornings, take him for pancakes and playground time, and return him exactly when promised. He never asked for more, never pushed for extended time, never presumed he'd earned anything beyond what Ashlyn explicitly offered. At work, Jeff had been promoted despite his protests. He was good at real estate development, had an eye for properties others overlooked, but he kept his life simple. Modest apartment, practical car. Most of his money went to Justin's college fund and charitable donations. He still volunteered at the youth center, still went to therapy, still did the work of being better, not because it would win Ashlyn back, but because he couldn't stomach being who he used to be. 8 months after the hospital crisis, Ashlyn had an emergency. Her biggest commission yet had hit a catastrophic problem. The center stone arrived flawed, unusable. The wedding was in 3 days. Everything she'd built felt threatened. She called Jeff without thinking. He was at her studio in 20 minutes, didn't try to fix it himself, just listened, made a call to a dealer who had the stone she needed, and offered to cover the cost when he saw the price. No, Ashlyn said firmly, I just needed the connection. Fair enough. Stay while I work? So Jeff stayed. 8 hours. Quiet in the corner, bringing water occasionally, not helping, just being present. At midnight, when the piece was complete, Ashlyn looked at him sleeping in the chair. He'd given up his entire evening without complaint or expectation. Something cracked open in her chest. Jeff, she said softly, touching his shoulder. He woke immediately. Do you need something? Come here. He crossed to her workbench. Ashlyn took his hand, first time she'd initiated contact since the hospital. I'm scared, she said quietly, of trusting you, of believing you've changed. I know. But I'm tired of being scared, tired of holding anger that only hurts me, tired of pretending I don't think about you. Jeff's breath caught. I'm not saying I forgive what happened. I don't know if I ever will. But the man who walked away isn't the man here at midnight. You've proven that. I love you, Jeff said, raw and honest. I know. That's what makes this hard. Ashlyn studied their hands. I want to try. Not going back to what we had. That's dead. But building something new. Whatever you're willing to give. Slow, months of dating, therapy, because I have trauma that won't disappear. All of that sounds perfect. She pulled him closer. Kiss me. He kissed her like she was precious and worth every moment of waiting. Soft and careful, filled with patience earned through loss. When they pulled apart, Ashlyn was crying. "I love you. I love who you've become, and I'm choosing to trust again even though it terrifies me. I'll spend my life proving I deserve this chance." They held each other as city lights twinkled beyond windows, feeling the past slowly loosening its grip. 1 year later, Jeff arrived at Ashlyn's apartment with a velvet box. Justin, now 5, greeted him enthusiastically. "Are we going to the park?" "Maybe later. I need to talk to your mum first." Ashlyn emerged wearing Jeff's old shirt she'd claimed. They'd moved slowly, building a relationship on honesty. They'd fought, worked through fear, gone to therapy together. They'd built something real. Jeff knelt to Justin's level. "Would it be okay if I asked your mama to marry me?" Justin's face lit up. "Yes. Can I help?" Jeff laughed, standing with Justin on his hip. He turned to Ashlyn, who was crying. The ring was something they'd designed together, 2 bands winding together, textured and real, meeting at a center stone that caught light and scattered it. "Ashlyn Bruce," Jeff said, voice steady. "I'm not who I was. You're not who you were. We've both been broken and rebuilt. That's what makes this real. We're not naive kids. We're 2 people who survived hell and chose each other anyway." He showed her their ring. "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, but I promise I'll choose you. Every day. Will you marry me?" Ashlyn smiled through tears. "You know the answer. We designed that ring months ago." "I know, but Justin wanted the full experience." "Cake," Justin added. Ashlyn laughed, pulling them close. "Yes, to all of it." Jeff slipped the ring on her finger. It sat beside the band she'd made herself after the attack, reminder that her hands could still create beauty. 2 rings, survival and new beginning, both necessary, both beautiful. "Are you sure," Ashlyn asked later, "about marrying someone whose hands shake, who has nightmares?" "I'm sure. I'm not marrying who you were. I'm marrying who you are, scars and all." "I'm scared." "Me too. Terrified of disappointing you." "Then we'll be scared together. We'll do the work, because that's real love, not easy passion. But this, the earned, battle-tested, chose each other anyway kind." The wedding happened 6 months later, small and perfect, Justin as ring-bearer, vows acknowledging pain and hope. Ashlyn wore a dress she designed. Jeff wore a simple suit. When they exchanged rings, everyone cried, because they knew the story, knew what they'd survived, knew this wasn't fairy tale but something better, 2 broken people who healed, who chose forgiveness because love was worth the risk, who built beauty from ruins. As they kissed, as Justin cheered, Ashlyn felt complete. Not because Jeff made her whole, she'd done that herself, but because she'd allowed someone to stand beside her, to prove love could be vulnerable and strong. Some things broke. Some things healed, and some became more beautiful in the mending. This was their story. Hard-won, painful, imperfect, real, and absolutely worth every moment of waiting. The end.